All right, ladies and gentlemen, you have what I have here for you is a map to look at to give you a geographic perspective of where we're talking about. To kind of zoom out, there's Russia. You know, here's the Iberian Peninsula. Here's Vietnam, where we're going next. Here is the Korean Peninsula that we just got through talking about. There's that 38th parallel, the divide between the two countries. We'll see something really strange, and I looked this up on YouTube, is when the space station, the International Space Station, flies over North and South Korea. Look that video up. North Korea is like a black hole. There's one little, did you see a couple little lights on in Pyongyang? And South Korea is really lit up, and then when it flies over Japan, it really lights up. So the next place we're going here is Vietnam. That's going to be the next area. Now, Vietnam had already been trying to gain its own independence. It was a French colony. The French had colonized there to try to reap the natural resources of Vietnam. And the French also go over into Cambodia. Now, so these countries are already trying to rid themselves of foreign rule when the United States decides that this will be one of the areas that they concentrate on for that containment policy. Okay, so getting back to this so that you can jot a couple of things down. This is another proxy war, Vietnam is. And America, they start to become involved in the 1960s because there was a capitalist regime in the 60s under Diem. That was the capitalist nationalist leader in the South. And the only thing JFK does, John F. Kennedy, before his untimely death in 1963, is he sends some weapons. He sends some artillery and some people to train South Vietnamese soldiers. Diem was a brutal dictator, and his tactics did not unify even South Vietnam, the South Vietnamese, let alone bring in the North. So the North Vietnamese and the North Vietnamese Army and Ho Chi Minh are already gaining a lot of popularity. So there's the deal with the Diem nationalist regime. They were very unpopular. The North was backed by China and Russia. And the U.S., eventually the United States, and there is a creepy recording of Lyndon B. Johnson when he becomes president, or it may have been when he was vice president, talking about having Diem assassinated. I can't talk to you about it here, but if you want to look it up on YouTube, you can, because you're on here, and because he uses some favorable, some unsavory language in that video. So after Kennedy is assassinated, here's the point you need to get, and you can get these if you need to pause it. It's fine. When Kennedy is assassinated, Lyndon Baines Johnson takes over. On August the 2nd of 1964, we have a ship out in the Gulf of Tonkin. It's a United States ship, and there were claims. Now, there's no clear facts on whether that ship was attacked or not. But Johnson said that the ship had been attacked by North Vietnamese, the North Vietnamese Navy. He goes to Congress and asks for not a declaration of war, but he asked for a resolution to have control of the military. All right. So, and again, If there had been a war declaration on Vietnam, there would have been all H break loose in the United States. The United States never really officially declares war on Vietnam. That's why this is called a conflict more than it is a war. War really isn't the right thing. And again, it's the United States, capitalism versus communism. So the Congress grants him this Gulf of Tonkin resolution, and he immediately sends in United States troops. It was so unpopular that hardly anybody volunteered for this mess. Lyndon Johnson has the draft reenacted. And so young men, this hadn't been used since World War II, and young men were taken up, had to take up arms and go off to war. So during this time also, Martin Luther King is railing and preaching against the Vietnam War. He called it this horrible, nasty war called Vietnam. Also activists, because like I told you, this is the time during civil rights marches, and the American people were very active in fighting government policy. Agent Orange and napalm were used. We've already used Agent Orange was part of your vocabulary. It caused massive genetic disorders. It killed off millions and millions of acres of jungle that still have not recovered. And here's the bottom line in the war in Vietnam. By the early 70s, really from the get-go, nobody knew, especially the United States soldiers, they didn't know what they were fighting for. And we lose about 230 to 240,000 troops in this war. And countless Vietnamese. So the United States soldiers, they didn't know what they were fighting for. And the people in America, the citizens, did not support any kind of military involvement in Vietnam. So when the soldiers came home and they saw all this footage, there were American citizens lined up waiting to spit on the American soldiers returning home. There was no popular support for this war, none whatsoever. So in early April 1975, the United States had already gave up hope on this ever working out, and they withdraw all of their troops, and by 1975 the North Vietnamese are inside Saigon, which was the capital of South Vietnamese, and they unify the country. They come in so quickly that there were people in the United States Embassy still, and they barely escaped out of there with their lives. So the questions that you have, why did U.S. enter the war? Containment. They were trying to stop the spread of communism. Okay, that's a repetitive theme. How did the conflict end? It was an embarrassment for the United States from start to finish. And there was the North Vietnamese come in, they conquer South Vietnamese. Now Vietnam is one country. Kind of unsure on their economic policies. They claim to be communist. They claim to be nationalist. But you can visit Vietnam today. They have resorts set up on the south coast, and it's not like I don't want to paint some kind of bad picture of it. What are the effects today? Well, speaking of what are the effects, Agent Orange is still having effect on the soldiers that were there, that came home. They suffered physical disabilities, and they passed genetic disorders on to their children. In Vietnam, the jungles never really recovered. Agent Orange is a powerful herbicide that it was so powerful that it messed up human genetics also. Why were these two campaigns successful? Why weren't they successful? Why did they fail? Again, these are proxy wars. And the reason the Korean War failed is because I don't think the United States ever brought in Russia or China and had a serious conversation with them to say we need to compromise. And I think that's the same thing with Vietnam. I don't think the United States ever should have got involved in that. They didn't have any business there. So why these campaigns were not successful is because it didn't have American popular support. Nobody cared. They didn't want to go fight over this thing as communism versus capitalism. So that should help you with those questions. And the one in the middle is why weren't these campaigns successful? Is because it never did gain popular American support. Nobody knew what they were fighting for. In World War II, you had a clear enemy. You had Adolf Hitler, and you knew what you were fighting. When you are fighting an idea, ladies and gentlemen, it becomes very, very vague and unclear what you're fighting for. So hopefully that helps you with those questions. If you have any more questions, let me know, I'm here for you.